Hello everybody, my name is Jenny and I am partially deaf. I wear a hearing aid. Hello everyone. Today I wanted to do a story about my hearing loss. This week is Deaf Awareness Week in the UK. So I wanted to do a story time about my hearing loss journey. I am partially deaf. I wear a hearing aid. Can you see it? Fabulous little device. This is actually my old one. At the end of this month, I am very excited to be getting 2 new hearing aids. I'll have one in each ear. Up until now, I've only had the one hearing aid, but technology being what it is, it has advanced to the point where I can now wear a hearing aid in both ears. And I'm very excited to be able to collect them at the end of this month. So, I was not born with hearing loss. I was born a relatively normal hearing child. All throughout my childhood and my teenage years, I had very good hearing, very good, normal childhood and teenage years. And then, when I was 20 years old, in the January of 2012, don't do that, I became very sick. And it was one of those sort of illnesses that you can kind of feel coming. You can feel it coming on and you know it's gonna be bad. It's gonna put you flat on your back in bed for a good number of days. And I had one of these illnesses. So I went to the doctor and said, look, I'm feeling really unwell. I know this is going to be a big one. Is there anything that I can take medication for? And the doctors went, well, to be honest, it's most likely just a bad case of the flu. Rest up, take lots of fluids, and you'll recover in a couple of weeks or so. So, fair enough. I sort of sorted out my life so that I could take a week off. Took a week off from work and just didn't do anything for a week and stayed in bed not doing anything. And to be perfectly honest, I don't remember a lot of that week. I know I was in bed, I know I didn't really do anything or go anywhere, but I can't really recall much in the way of individual things that I did that week. Now, looking back on it, it was possibly something worse than just the flu. And I have had blood tests in the intervening years, and not long after that illness, after it became obvious that it had done something to my hearing, and I actually they found that I had meningitis antibodies in my blood. And they thought that maybe it was a strain of viral meningitis, which can be horrendously bad and hugely debilitating. And if it was that, and I only got a little bit of hearing loss from it, then I was incredibly lucky. There are some people who are nowhere near as lucky as to just lose their hearing. It can do really, really nasty things. So in the few months after this particularly nasty bout of flu that I had been told it was at the time, I knew that something wasn't quite right. After you've had a cold and sometimes you've had all your sinuses blocked up, sometimes it can affect your hearing. Sometimes you get sort of very stuffed up ears and things become very muffled and you can't hear quite as well as you used to be able to. And I just kept being told by my doctors that, oh, it's just the leftovers from this illness that you had. Don't worry, it'll clear itself up eventually. And it got to the point where I was kind of sick of hearing this because there wasn't any change. It wasn't improving at all. And it got to the point where I stood in the middle of the doctor's surgery and said, look, something is not right. Give me a hearing test. And you're perfectly within your right to do that. If you know there is something wrong, you can demand certain tests to be done. So they went, okay, yeah, we'll give you a hearing test, whatever. And it was a very simple hearing test that was just done right there in the doctor's. There are lots of different levels of hearing tests that you can have. And this one was like the basic level of hearing test. And my results came back that I had nearly 60% hearing loss in my left ear. And the doctor suddenly went, yeah, that's not normal even after an illness like this. And at this point it had been 2 months, and it should have been much better than that by that point if it had just been leftovers from this illness that I'd had. So the doctors understood that something wasn't quite right, and they referred me to the ear, nose and throat people at the hospital, who did further examinations and tests and all kinds of things. And I ended up having an MRI scan to see if there was anything, affecting my auditory nerve that could have caused this very sudden loss of hearing. And it was a pretty long journey from being, from that initial illness to getting my hearing aids and being sort of acknowledged as, yes, you do have hearing loss. This is something that is part of your life now. It was, I think, just over a year from the illness to that point. And it has been quite a struggle to adapt to it. At first, I didn't really sort of give it much thought. Oh, this is just something that I have to deal with, whatever. I'll just carry on my life as usual. But I couldn't quite carry on my life as usual because I couldn't hear things the same way I used to be able to. I have hearing loss in both ears. It's more severe in my left ear than in my right ear, but it is hearing loss in both ears. And in my left ear, it has improved from that initial hearing test that I was given in the doctor's office. It is now classed as 40% hearing loss in my left ear and 30% hearing loss, roughly, in my right ear. And it is high frequency noises that I have lost, or high frequency sounds. Now, everybody's hearing loss is wildly different. Even if somebody were to have exactly the same symptoms as I do, exactly the same illness and exactly the same history, their hearing loss might be totally different. So my hearing loss is very similar to what you would expect a sort of an elderly person to have. It is very often the high frequency sounds that degrade over time as you age. So when you get into your sort of 70s and 80s, it's fairly normal to have some hearing loss at that level of frequencies. It, again, is worse in some people than others, depending on what your occupation had been, what sort of environment you've spent most time in. If you've spent lots of time in noisy environments, then it can cause more hearing damage than just your average wear and tear on the body. So I basically had the hearing of an 80-year-old at the age of 21. So it was a bit of an adjustment. And wearing my hearing aid does help, but it cannot replace what I've lost. It can amplify the frequencies that I have hearing loss on. It can help give me a little bit more clarity to people's speech particularly, and to music and things like that, but it can't replace the hearing that I no longer have. So round about this time I was heading into university, and university is a pretty big culture shock. It's, you know, you're out in the world pretty much on your own for the first time. You have to be responsible for your own life, you have to feed yourself, you have to get yourself places, and for a lot of people it can be a big adjustment, and it was a pretty big adjustment to me as well, but I was also struggling with adapting to this much quieter world that I now lived in. And I will be forever grateful to the friends that I made at university. I had my little group of friends, and it wasn't until I left university and went off into the rest of the world of work, the world of socialising with the world, that I realised how accommodating they had been and how many allowances they had made for me. And you guys know who you are. I love you. And I will be forever grateful for the way you treated me and the way you included me and the way you made sure that I understood what was happening and what was being said. And it's not something that I get very often in the rest of the world, even from my family. Again, I love my family and they do make huge accommodations for me and allowances for the fact that I can't hear properly anymore. But occasionally they forget. You know, they grew up with me, they you know, knew me from birth or being a very young child, and they knew me as a hearing person. They knew me as someone who can hear just fine. And sometimes they do occasionally sort of slip back into that that way of thinking and that way of being, and they forget that I don't have the clarity anymore and that they need to enunciate their words. They need to make sure they're facing me, and they need to make sure that they've got my attention before they start speaking to me. The number of times that my partner, bless him, my wonderful fiance, he is my hearing dog. He helps me no end, but he's far too quiet around the house. He can sneak up on me constantly, and I know it's not difficult to do to a deaf girl, but the number of times I have been standing at the sink doing some washing up, and all of a sudden he's there, and I haven't heard him enter the room, I haven't heard him make a noise, I had no idea that he was there, and he's just appeared. Ugh. Makes me jump. And I also struggle in new places as well. I really do struggle with new people. And even though I tell new people that I meet in social situations, I tell new employers that I have that I am partially deaf, I've got this hearing loss, I don't hear the same way as everybody else does. Because it's not something that they're used to, and it's not something that they have necessarily dealt with before, they don't always know the best ways to communicate with me. And I find that a lot of social cues kind of get in the way, as it were. It's not generally acceptable etiquette out in the world to tap somebody you've only just met, you know, unless it's really quite urgent and, you know, flies undone kind of thing. But that would be something that is really, really helpful for me. If somebody would just tap me on the shoulder or tap me on my arm, that would get my attention before they started speaking. that would be so helpful. Please, everybody, do that. So yes, if you do know somebody in your life who has hearing loss, if they're an older person or if they're somebody my age or younger, there are a few very simple things that you can do to help them understand you and help them communicate with you. So if you want to get their attention, make sure that you actually do have their attention before you start speaking to them. You know, if that is a tap on the shoulder or a sort of hello kind of thing, make sure that you have their attention before you start trying to speak to them, give them instructions or tell them a joke. Make sure that they know that you're speaking to them, because I don't always know. I have had one person who was apparently having an entire conversation with me and I didn't even know they were there. They were standing just out of my field of vision, and they were asking me about the most recent episode of Game of Thrones, I think it was. You know, they'd been standing just behind my shoulder while I was doing something else, saying, oh, did you see such a thing? And wasn't it amazing when this happened? I can't remember which episode it was, just whatever. And they were then quite sort of put out when I then walked away without acknowledging them or saying anything or responding in any way. It's because I didn't know they were speaking to me. I hadn't heard them. I didn't know they were there. So make sure you have somebody's attention when you're speaking to them. Also, there's no need to shout necessarily, but there is a need to speak clearly, to enunciate all of the letters and all of the syllables in a word for a person who has hearing difficulties to be able to understand you. Because even though it is not my primary way of communicating, I still speak, I still listen, but I do now lip read. It's not perfect. I struggle with people who have accents quite a lot, but it's something that I'm working on and something that I have been steadily improving since I lost my hearing. And it can help to fill in the blanks, as it were, because I might not hear all of a word. So I might not hear the beginning letter. So mother and brother, when I'm not looking at a person, they sound almost identical to me. But if I can see their mouth, I can see if they made the M sound or the B sound. And that can help fill in the gaps of what I'm missing from a sentence and from a word. I once had a very confusing conversation with someone who I was walking next to. We were speaking to each other as we were walking down a path. And obviously in that situation I can't see them, and that's fine, that is a normal situation. But it is something to be aware of, that they might not be catching everything that you're saying in that sort of situation. And I got very confused halfway through the conversation when I had thought we'd been speaking about somebody's brother when the entire time we had been speaking about their mother. So there was, oh yes, their brother is French. And I was like, but they aren't French, I don't understand. How can one person be French and then their brother not be French? And this other person turned around to me and said, what are you talking about? I wasn't talking about their brother. I was talking about their mother. Right. Got it. Okay. So, you know, those sort of situations do happen quite a lot. So it is the clarity of speech and facing somebody when you're speaking to them. The number of times I've been in a situation where somebody has been speaking to me and then they've looked off that way, but they're still speaking to me, you know. They go, oh, can you tell me where such a thing is? And I'll go, I'm sorry, can I tell you where what is? Oh, such a thing. I I don't know, I can't see your mouth, I can't hear what you're saying. Please just face me when you're speaking. I do now have a collection of badges that I can wear, and they are just little cute little badges that say please face me when you're speaking, or please bear with me, I'm hard of hearing, or anything like that. In fact, I think I'll show you. So here are some of the badges. I got most of these for Christmas from my mother, and I'm very, very pleased with them. So I've got this one here, which says, please bear with me, I'm hard of hearing. And it's got a little teddy bear on it, which is really cute. And then I've got this one, which is kind of like, it's got like a galaxy background, and says, please be patient, I'm deaf. I've got this one, which is a really useful one that I wear this one quite a lot. It says, please face me when speaking, I am hard of hearing. Which I think is very cool, very useful. Please face me when speaking. I've also got this one, which is similar to the other one. It says, please bear with me, I'm hard of hearing, and it's got a little koala on it. It's so cute. I really like this one because it's quite eye-catching, but unfortunately the words on it aren't as easy to read, so if I could like combine it with one of the other ones, that'd be really helpful. So I usually wear this one in combination with one of the other ones. This one says, please face me when speaking, I read lips, and it's got a cat with green eyes looking at you. So it's quite eye-catching. People tend to look at eyes more than they look at other things. Don't know. But because it's difficult to read, I usually wear another badge that's easier to read next to it. Those are my badges that I use to help me communicate with the rest of the world. So yeah, my hearing journey has been sort of long and a little convoluted, but I reckon it's pretty standard and pretty normal in the way some people might experience hearing loss. I've also, unfortunately, received an inner ear injury, as the doctors put it, which causes me to experience tinnitus. Now, tinnitus is again something that is very varied from person to person, and it impacts on people in very different ways. So tinnitus is hearing a sound inside your head, as it were, hearing a noise that is not there, and it's something that is steady and constant and really annoying. Most people have probably heard or experienced tinnitus at one point or another in their lifetime. If you've gone to a very loud concert and your concert's finished and you're heading home and you can hear that sort of high-pitched ringing or whistling, that's tinnitus. And for the vast majority of people in that sort of situation, it goes away after a couple of hours or a couple of days, depending on the individual. But for some people, particularly people who have experienced hearing loss, tinnitus is a permanent part of their life, and it is something that they do have to live with on a daily basis. Now, my tinnitus, it's kind of difficult to describe. It's a high-pitched, ringing hiss, as it were. So if you were to have like a badly tuned radio with lots of hissing static and crackliness, and somebody was playing a high-pitched tone through that radio that was hissing and crackling, that's as close as I can describe to my tinnitus, and it is something that I experience all the time. Silence is now a thing of the past for me. It's not something I will ever experience ever again, because no matter where I am or what I'm doing, I can hear this ringing in my ears. Now, for me, I have managed to cope with it and deal with it fairly well, I think. It doesn't tend to impact me most of the time. It doesn't interfere with my day-to-day life very often anymore, and I can ignore it for the vast majority of the time. I'm talking about it now, so I can hear it now. But the vast majority of the time, I can just ignore it, and it's not something that I pay attention to. And that was actually something that the doctors suggested very early on, because when I first experienced my hearing loss, they were asking about the tinnitus, and I was like, yes, it's there constantly. Why is it there? Please make it go away. It's really annoying. And they were saying, to be honest, the best way to cope with it is to make sure you aren't in silent situations. So if you're home alone and you've got nothing else going on, nobody else is talking to you, nobody else is there, play some music in the background, or play, video, or turn the TV on and just have it on in the background. And the second piece of advice was to not listen to it. Try and not to listen to it. And I found that was a very helpful suggestion for me. Just pretend it's not there and stop giving it as much attention, and then it won't impact on you as much anymore. That is what worked for me. It won't necessarily work for everybody. Again, everybody's hearing and tinnitus experiences are going to be completely different. It's just how it worked out for me. I also found that once I had my hearing aids, it helped an awful lot with my tinnitus. Not directly. The hearing aids can't do anything to counteract or combat the tinnitus. The tinnitus is damage to different parts of your inner ear that causes this noise, and there's nothing the hearing aids as an external thing can do about that. But because it was helping me hear things on a day-to-day basis much better, I wasn't stressing as much anymore. And that's something that causes my tinnitus to get really, really loud, is if I'm stressing about something, my tinnitus will just get louder and louder and louder, and that will stress me out as well. So while I was struggling to hear people before I got my hearing aids, my tinnitus was just really loud, and I felt as if I was trying to hear people over my tinnitus, because the tinnitus was the louder thing that I could hear at the time. Now that I have got the hearing aids, and I can hear people better when I've got them in, and I can make more sense of the noise that I'm hearing, it doesn't stress me out quite as much. I'm not stressing to try and hear people anymore. Another thing I would say, if you've got people in your life who have experienced hearing loss, is please be patient, and please give them the benefit of the doubt, because it becomes exhausting to try and hear people and to try and hear things, because it's no longer a automatic thing. You don't hear about, really, you don't think about listening to people. It's just something that you do. But when you've experienced hearing loss, it becomes a conscious effort to try and hear somebody and listen to somebody and understand somebody, and it is exhausting, especially early on. For me, when I first lost my hearing and experienced that illness and experienced that hearing loss, it was exhausting just sitting down and having a conversation with somebody. I could only do it for maybe 10 minutes at a time. I'm much better now because I've had lots of practice over the past 6 or so years, and it's something that I have built up again. I've built up this ability to be able to hear people and listen to people in not quite the same way as I used to, but close enough. So please do be patient with people if they are tired and if they are struggling to follow what you're saying. It's so tiring. So give them a break, let them look at their phone for a few minutes, let them sort of switch off and not be part of the conversation for a moment, and then re-engage them when they're a little bit more fresh. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this to be a interesting story. If this is something that you've experienced, please comment down below, let me know your story. If it's something that someone in your family or your friends has experienced, I hope this has helped you understand them and their journey a little bit more. And if you're somebody who is going through this as well, keep going. You're doing really well, and you will get there. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and blessed be.